there is some kind of call that's not happening from Zoom to Zoom's not closing YouTube live events. So when it'll start the YouTube live event, I don't know whether that's a YouTube thing or a Zoom thing, but it's been that way for months. So basically, if you stream to YouTube, Zoom won't close the event. So you just have to go in. So literally every day after this, if you ever see it run long, it's because I forgot or I had to run to a meeting or something else. But every single day, the moment I say bye guys, I pop into YouTube and I go in and I have to go to create live event, which is stupid, some YouTube thing. Hit create live event, then it shows me my managed projects, then it shows me a way then I can kill it. So
I just wondered if it would be helpful to you to look up and say, oh, it's 9 o'clock. That means the show's over.
It's if I can remember, I can. I mean, generally what happens is if I don't do it, it means I'm heads down on something else and I'm not, and I have to admit that it's not something that I'm staying up late worrying about. So it's
okay, fair enough.
So that's the issue. Usually I'm in something and I don't. The funny thing about being very ADD is that you actually, if you build the muscle to not be ADD, you get very focused, because you won't allow things to get into your head. And so you build muscles to just go this and just push everything away. And so if I don't want to hear something, I don't hear it. They're extremely strong muscles to ignore things. So anyway, so that's how I survive with that. So anyway, I think first, before we get into this, we've got a couple people here that have been in and out of, I think, of the Final Cut thing. Anything interesting that you guys have seen? For Chris, Alex didn't go. He's not going. But Bill and Chris, I think you guys, did you speak there?
I hosted a panel. Not really speaking, but Bill had some classes, I think.
Yeah, I just had one on the very first day, and it was really interesting. It's a whole different, thing doing virtual, because I've done a lot of on-stage panels at trade shows and stuff like that. But the virtual thing was a little different. Thank goodness it was in Zoom, and thank goodness I had so much practice being here and doing this, because it made things a lot easier. The other thing that was weird is that the sessions are just 25 minutes long. There's a short one, 25 minutes, and then I think there's an hour. Trying to do something useful in 25 minutes is a real challenge. It gets you into that. I would have written you a shorter letter if I had more time syndrome.
And does that include QA?
Well, yeah, you can go over, but the next sessions start. So you can't be guaranteed that you're going to keep your audience after the half hour crosses over. So you really have to, I spent a lot of time trying to, okay, I can't do that and I can't do that. I'll do these 4 things and that's it. And so I think that kind of helps consolidate. So maybe that's helping with information density. That's how I saw it anyway.
What did you think, Chris, of the experience of that?
It's, I reiterate it every time I get a chance. I sat in on an hour-long color session by Jeff Greenberg. And I got to say, sitting in my comfortable chair, sitting in front of a 27-inch iMac and being able to see his screen, full screen, it's like, it's better than sitting front row in a ballroom somewhere. It's better than sitting front row. And, it's funny. He's got all these little gimmicks where it's like, oh, look at my mouse, anytime he clicks on something, a little highlight comes up. You absolutely don't need it,
right?
Because it's literally right in front of you. And so every chance I get, I always say, this is better than driving to Cupertino or flying to Cupertino. I hosted a talk about surviving in COVID, and we talked a little bit about some of the stuff that we talk about here. Just ways to use virtual things or shifting your business toward virtual things. But the other interesting thing, Greenberg's a pretty good friend of mine, and I don't think it's really public knowledge, but he said that the enrollment was the highest of any of the
of course, because
any of the events, because you don't have to go, and you get to draw from the whole world much more easily. So it absolutely ticks all the things about, Alex Lindsay's philosophy about virtual events. Take away time and space, it ends up being better. The limits of time and space.
Yeah. I think that we're seeing that with a bunch of our clients, that they're just seeing enrollment so high compared to what they had before. I mean, some clients are somewhere between 3 and 5 times the number of people showing up, for their events. And this is for both unpaid and paid events. They're just seeing a much higher enrollment. And it's because people didn't have to invest in the hotels and the flights and the days off from work and all the other things. I mean, the extra days. It's fine to take a day or two to go to a conference. It's not fine to take a week to do a 2-day conference.
I think the real key, especially for something like this, where it's multiple places that you can go, the real key to making these events successful is everything that you have to deal with before you enter the conference. So like all the registration has to be smooth. All of the communication with you about what things are what time. I found I missed the whole first day because I didn't notice that on the web page where you pick the class you want to go to, it says what time it is, and way over here it says, "Oh, your time," and I was 3 hours late to something.
Right.
Because I didn't notice the your time category. It's like, oh, that was a rookie move. But it was a bad user interface design.
Yeah. Yeah.
It also made me think globally much more, because I realized that I was using an idiom in one little example of Costco. And I thought, well, wait a second, somebody may be watching this from Mumbai and they're not going to know what Costco is. So you really have to vet your presentations to be as universally applicable as possible. And you can still say that, but I had to explain what that was.
Yeah. Yeah. So I was talking to someone that we were working with, and they were talking about the fact that one of the things they really liked about virtual conferences is that before you get on a phone call, like in between seminars, you'd have a business phone call or something. And they said, because everything is in Zoom, they're like, you're in the conference and then you just jump out, and it's like being in the office because your office is Zoom. They said, you just jump out and have your meeting in video and then come back and then jump back into the conference. And they were like someone that really likes going to conferences and aren't planning to do it anymore. Like they're just like, I hope that conferences learn to do this, because I don't really want to go to Vegas anymore. Like I think that's one of the number one things that I've heard is I don't really want to go to Vegas anymore.
Sorry,
John.
very
popular, thing. It's just because that's all it is, and I think a lot of folks in the tech industry aren't really big gamblers. They don't go to a lot of the shows. They don't, they're not as, that's not they're not salespeople, they're tech people. And I think that there's a difference in the personalities. Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah. The other thing that was really interesting for me is the coffee breaks that have been happening, because you may have 50 people on screen, and without the office hour expectation of people will take their turns and raise hands and kind of fit in, you can get one person who has something that they're really passionate about, and they'll take up 40% of the entire coffee break. Right. Just continuing, and there's no way to stop that and move over. And so to think of some system for including more people in these big Zooms that have a lot of voices that we could all learn from, and not have one voice dominated.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to breakout rooms and webinars. I will say that I think that that's going to be a really interesting thing where we can do breakouts. But I think that then you can, and I have decided after this morning, people didn't see the pre-show, that I'm going to have a cookie room. There's always going to be, like the room before, there's always going to be a cookie room. If you want to go talk about cookies, there's going to be like a breakout room that people can just go and talk about cookies. Because we had like 20 minutes of cookies this morning, and I finally was like, okay, we can't keep on talking about cookies. Anyway, but I think that having those breakout rooms and allowing people to go to things that they're interested in, and again, to your point, a lot of people to leave. Like if someone's just talking endlessly, the people who aren't interested in whatever they're talking about just bound around to another room. So I think that there's a lot there that'll be interesting. Anyway, but was there anything new from Final Cut that anyone saw that they were particularly interested in?
No, I think that should be today, because okay. Apple's doing their 2 big presentations today. So if we get any insider knowledge, that should be. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you heard the thing, but they're doing it on WebEx rather than on Zoom. That was really interesting. So
I'm feeling it's probably because I think that it might be that Apple, that's what they use internally, so it's just easier for them to connect to. Probably
so
from their computers.
It's so bad.
It is bad. It's really bad. But my guess is when corporations do it, when they say, oh, we can only come in from that, a lot of times that's because that's what they use internally. So it's really easy for them. It's my guess is it's easy to come in from a conference room to WebEx. That's usually what we see.
Yeah, I heard that they're very skittish about people recording. They claim that through WebEx they can tell if somebody is recording.
Yeah,
No,
not really.
there's nothing to keep. I'm not expecting anything new to be shown,
Yeah.
to be revealed about Final Cut. They already gave it out. It will be a very perfect little Apple presentation that's very controlled.
Right.
They claim it's going to be live. I don't know.
It probably is. I don't see any reason why I couldn't just sit there and talk about it. I mean, yeah. We'll see. Yeah. Go ahead, Alex. Were you going to say something?
Yeah, as regards, I think I've been to 3 of these creative summits. I went to the one that was in San Jose in the first year, and then two after that. Just as a tip in general, that the sessions I taught were an hour and 15 minutes long. I was given. So my method initially, when I thought about how am I going to fill an hour and 15 minutes on this, and then as soon as you get your list of things to include in the session, you just go, I've got 3 hours worth of stuff. I don't know what to do. What I actually did, create the presentation and then record myself using screen recorder and give the whole long presentation. And the cool thing is, and then I see how long it is, and I think, well, I want it to last 55 minutes, so I've got 20 minutes of Q&A. And then I just cut out bits, literally, of what I presented, and I know exactly how long it's going to be to say that, and also maybe cut that down to 50 minutes because I want to, make it 50 minutes. And it really got my time to fit the slot. So that was really good.
One of the things that I, for years, I was on first Screensavers, then Call for Help, and then, and I had a 7-minute block, with Leo, so I would have my world lived in these little 7-minute windows. And so my rule was, I knew Leo's going to ask me a bunch of questions. He's going to ask me how I'm doing and everything else. So I really have a 3.5-minute block, so that whatever I'm going to show on the air, I have to be able to do in 3.5 minutes. And one of the things that would work on is the first time I did it, and really the way to do it while you're explaining it was typically 18 to 20 minutes. Like that's how long it took to do it. And then I would say, okay, well, I'm going to, what I call shake and bake. I'm going to shake and bake this piece, and I'm going to shake and bake this piece. It's kind of the Julia Childs kind of like, and so I'd shake and bake a whole bunch of bits and pieces down. But the thing that was really useful for me was that I built so when I was on Screensavers, I think after a while, when the company started expanding, mostly because I was doing these shows, I couldn't do, it's funny, you do the thing that makes it really work, and then you stop doing that because you're just too busy to keep doing it, because it was an enormous amount of work. So me showing up on Screensavers on Wednesdays, I started working on a Monday morning. So I would figure out what I'm going to do. I'd figure out how to do it on Monday, and then I would tighten it all up, and I would do it over and over and over again, just over, and I would go, okay, this step is a little harder. This step is too long. I took too long to say this. And so I just do it over and over and over again. And then in FileMaker, I would make step-by-step. So the FileMaker is easy because I could rearrange I could rearrange the order, and it would automatically change the step numbers and everything else. And I had a picture of what to do, and then I had instructions of what to do, and then why. And I put that all through that. Anyway, so I had the 20-minute video of how to do it, and I had this little PDF that I would put out of the step-by-step of what I did in Screensavers. What I did on Screensavers was 3.5 minutes, but or 7 minutes. At the end of it, I said, that was great. If I went by too fast, you can go to my website and download and watch the video, a longer video with a step-by-step to do it. And the reason I'm sharing this with all of you is because I got 1,000 new emails a week doing like it was extremely effective, because I'm going to show you something that's impressive. I'm going to give you enough that you get excited about it and you feel like you know it. And the chances of you going to get the rest of it is very high, and so it by itself as its own piece, I'm not like giving you a preview. I'm giving you a real thing on the show. You don't need any more. It's done. But for those of you who want to dig in further, go through, and at the time I had an email, wall. Just give me your email and I'll give you some content kind of thing. And 1,000 new emails a week. Now, so over, I accumulated 70,000 emails in 1 year, doing that. And when I went to sell my first Photoshop disc, I literally just sent an email out to that list. And so, I said, oh, it's $35. It'll be $50 next week, but this week it's $35. And sold 2,000. We didn't even know how to make 2,000 CDs. Like sold 2,000 CDs in 3 days. Like it was like, and then we were like, and how do we actually ship these? And so it was, so the thing is but we had built this I had built this relationship with folks by producing these things every week. that were, these tutorials. And so I would just recommend, only reason I kind of go off on that is just to recommend thinking about content that way, about how do you hand content to people and, effectively to make that work. Anyway, it's a way to think about that process. So now that we've gone off the rails, let's go back to questions.
Okay, the first one today comes from Jeffrey Reyes in the Bronx. Alex, if you were to buy a monitor right now, what brand or specs like size, resolution, and ports would you look for?
The one we buy the most as a computer monitor is the Dell 28-inch 4K. It's got the downside. The good side of it is it's got the basic things for a monitor for me, and this is computer monitors. All computer monitors for me, have to be a C13. C13 is I can't unplug one without disconnecting all of you, but a C13 is your typical computer plug, with the 3 prongs that kind of go into the back of your computer or most of your hardware. I won't buy a monitor that doesn't have that, because it's just that way I can have the same. There's 2 things. One is I can have the same thing anywhere in the world. I can find that plug in a hardware store. So it's not an IEC cable, by the way. It's a C13, because they're all IEC cables. The specific one that I use is a C13. The figure 8 that you think of as a C7. So these are you know your C's. So anyway, so a C13 is one requirement. It has to have a VESA mount on the back. So there has to be a VESA mount on the back so that I can mount it to an arm. Or anything, or a C stand, or anything else. There you go. There's Jeffrey's just showing a C13. That's a C14 into a C13. That's not the one that you would get to go into your wall is a C15. So a C15 into a C13. That's a C14 into C13. Anyway, so one requirement is that it has to have a VESA mount. The other requirement is it has to have a C13, and and then it obviously has to have HDMI. You'd think that'd be an issue, but there are monitors you can buy that don't have HDMI in them. So I've had people do that. And then for me, 4K is now kind of a minimum. The downside of the Dells are that the latency is 2 or 3 frames. So you just have to know that you're looking through that. There's a little bit of a latency on the monitor that we've gotten used to. For computer monitors, that's a lot of what I do. Yeah, there's the VESA mount in the back. Anyway, does anyone else have any other monitors? Now, for TV monitors, for HDR, for instance, I lean towards the OLED LGs. Those are kind of their interface is horrible, but the blacks are really good, and so for the type of thing, they have one of those ones where you have to use it like a little game controller and move it around, and it's super annoying. Stuart, and then Jeffrey.
Oddly enough, I was shopping for monitors with a mate 3 or 4 days ago. And one of the things that I noticed straight away was some of the menu systems on some of the monitors are frustrating.
Yeah, no,
I'm trying to keep it clean. It's just like doing things where you hit the menu button, then your arrows, then a confirmation button.
Yep.
But these wanted to hit the menu button as the confirmation button. It's like it was just little things that slows you down when you're operating it. So regardless of brand, have a play with the buttons and make sure it's easy for you to find the features you want to turn off.
Yep,
because
absolutely.
all the features will be turned on when you get it, and you'll turn them off.
Yep, absolutely. Jeffrey?
What are your thoughts on curved monitors versus flat monitors?
I don't like them. I don't like curved monitors. Like I just feel like there's angles.
Gamers.
I'm trying to use them my monitors tend to become arrays. Like I hook them all up, and I'm adding more monitors, and I very rarely have less than a couple. Like when I'm in the hotel, I've got one monitor, but most of the time I have 3-4 monitors that I'm moving around. A curved one just becomes this kind of weird thing in my system. So I don't use them. All right, next question.
All right, moving on to Matt Cool of Montreal, who asks, has anybody figured out how to get stereo audio to work again on Zoom meetings? I know you spoke about multi-channel interfaces being summed together, but even my 2-channel Behringer is being summed. Any ideas?
Yeah, go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, I mean, like so far, as long as I have stereo audio enabled and I turn on original sound, I haven't had issues with sending out the stereo. So
for some
I
reason,
don't know.
Victor's had trouble with our meeting specifically. But I don't know if but you, Victor, you're not having trouble with your own meetings, and maybe it's webinar as well.
Is it
Victor
just me or is
frozen?
Victor frozen?
Yeah, I think
Victor's
Victor's
frozen.
frozen.
Victor, you're frozen.
You must have an ice storm in South Dakota.
Yeah. All right, next question.
Moving on to Victor's question, go figure. Victor asked, when using the portal to boost your resolution, is it correct that once you join, you can leave in 20 seconds and the Zoom call retains the 720p settings?
Guy, is that the truth?
I'm still kind of kicking it around because we can't figure out if it's via a paid account that's doing it, or if you can just do it with a free account, or what's making it stick. So it works, but then sometimes it doesn't hold. So I'm not sure exactly what's going on there.
Got it. Yeah, I think that if it works, if this thing works with the Facebook, portal, it seems like a really cheap and inexpensive way to pop the resolution. But even then, if you're going to do it for anything that's regular, the cost per month isn't that high. I mean, if you're going to do it as a business, a $40 a month for having a room that can pop into things isn't that big of a.
Well, that's the difference, is that the portal is not a Zoom room, so you do not have to pay the monthly.
No, I know
fee
that.
for
I'm
it.
just saying, even if you don't get the
Okay.
portal, if for some reason the portal doesn't make work for you, that having a Zoom room, might be okay. I guess with the Zoom room, now that there's a web access to it, I guess theoretically you could put that in the cloud, right? You could put a Zoom room into AWS and have a controller.
That's what Grant and I were just talking about a few minutes ago, is we're both itching to try it, because previously when I tried to do an install up there, the installer wouldn't allow. And I tried all kinds of instances, all the way up to some of the biggest ones with graphics, adding the graphics capability, like what a vMix instance would be, and it still wouldn't install.
Interesting.
So I'm sure somebody's got it working. I just haven't been able to do it.
Interesting. Yeah. Go ahead, Victor.
Yeah, he's back.
I lost you.
Oops, you're muted.
Yes, I was muted. Sorry. But like you're saying, for $150 to have it do that for a non-business, I think it's a pretty good deal.
Right. Next question. Oh, go ahead, Mickey.
Moving on.
Mickey, you got to be faster. You always get the hand right at the very end.
Yeah, sorry. Just wondering if you guys wanted to go back to what we were going to ask Victor earlier regarding stereo.
Stereo. You're not having any issue with stereo, right, Victor? Outside of this webinar.
Correct.
Yeah.
I had 0 issues that Sunday.
Yeah. So, and that's a meeting, or is that that's a meeting, not a webinar, right?
It's a meeting. I have the pro account. Yes.
So maybe it's a webinar issue that you kind of keep your eye on, as opposed to a meeting. Next question.
Eric Hall from Mount Vernon, Washington asks, can Discord serve as a budget comms platform?
I've definitely seen people use Discord as a budget comms platform. Go ahead, John.
Chris Fenwick and I have kicked the tires on using Discord for comms, and we didn't find it effective as opposed to using a real comm package. So we gave up on it.
One of the things that we're experimenting with a little bit more right now is this mixture of, for people that are on site, is using, so Studio Technologies makes I think it's a 374A, is a 4-channel Dante pack. So it's a comm pack. It's comms, but it just has an Ethernet into it. Still got a 5-pin that you put into your headset, but it's an Ethernet into the comm pack, and you can get 2-channel or I think single channel, 2-channel, and 4-channel. And we got a couple 4 channels recently, and the idea is to integrate those with Unity using Dante, so that, because it's just Dante, so anywhere you can put Dante, you can drop a pack. And we've used them in the past for small hits, but now but they were always just a Dante. We were just using the belt packs for a Dante platform locally. But I think that, because one of the problems we have with Unity is the phone thing, like it's just like, it seems like a good idea, but when you're really doing production and you're really cutting shows and you're really doing all those things, not having a real belt pack is the thing for us. And so, but I think that the interaction between Unity and these little belt packs, could be an interesting interaction that could be useful to extend that out if you wanted to, without buying something larger. talk about comms tomorrow. But we're also experimenting with, a lot of different. Telos has now got their own little comm systems that are interesting, that don't have a hub. And of course, we're still using ClearComm for a lot of our stuff. So it's a mixture of, we're trying to look at what is best for each installation. Anyway, next, go ahead, Baiju, and then Courtney.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment, like in the last few events we have been using Unity, and in the main one we did in North America, we did use Unity locally to plug into a local comm system, which worked. But like one of the gaps that seems to be in Unity right now is there's no way to add analog comms into the system unless you have the server on site. So I wish there was a better way to get that audio into the system. You can do a workaround using maybe a stereo out of a Unity receiver at one point or ganging them up. But does anybody else have a better solution to bring in at least 4 or 4 channels into it easily without using Unity Connect, which is a possibility, but it's expensive because you're looking at $1,000 basically.
Yeah, we'll talk about that tomorrow as far as digging into it deeper as far as Unity goes, because that's all we're going to talk about in the second hour is comms.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead, Courtney.
Does that Dante belt pack you talked of have Wi-Fi? Are they Wi-Fi enabled, or does Dante only work over PoE? Or
they only work over PoE. I don't even know. I think they're PoE, but they're just over wired, because Dante doesn't really work over Wi-Fi. The latency is too high for Dante to do that.
What's the cost of that, Alex? Is
the
it
4 channel
effective?
The 4 not really. The 4 channel is like $650 per unit. That's I think that the 2 channels is considerably less expensive. So we're kind of mixing and matching in a current process. But I think that they range between $300 and $700 each. Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, just to answer Courtney's question, yeah, it's EtherCon with PoE in it.
It's the nice thing about it is, I will say, comms over Dante is crystal clear. So for many of us who've grown up with analog 2-wire running, 150 feet, when you get on Dante, there's like no sound at all. Like it's just no hiss, no sound, no buzz, and all those things are just gone, and it's nice and crystal clear. All right, next question.
All right, moving to Guy Cochran from the panel in Seattle, who wants to know what's the best Lidar 3D scanner app for scanning a room.
So the 2 that I have been playing with, that I've been happy with, I've downloaded almost all of them. I'm trying to look at my phone in front of me, but the Sitescape is one, and the other one is the 3D Scanner app. And 3D Scanner app is and it's the one with the little house, but those, not the one with the 3 blocks. That's a bunch of shysters. Anyway, so I played with a bunch of the other ones, and I just couldn't quite get the interface to do what I wanted it to do. I will say that we're still in kind of early days. Guy, which one are you showing there? That's that from Sitescape?
This one is Sitescape, and that's the beta for Sitescape.
Yep.
Rotate this room around a little bit. It's got a lot of those points. Is that the same thing that you're seeing? Is that you just get a ton of these?
Yeah.
points?
So it's not in geometry. It's building voxels. So it's just a point cloud, because that's what it's getting back from what the scanner is giving it is points, not geometry. And so now what you can do is you can measure between all those points. It's kind of cool.
This other one, Polycam, is pretty cool because it's got, let's see if I can pull up the library. It's got the measuring tape where after you do a scan, you can actually pull up this little measuring stick, and then you can, like I just measured that. I don't know if you can see it, and it says 7.9.
And
cool.
You can do that in 3D Scanner app as well, where you can hit measure and do it. But that's a new one for me. Polycam is what you're using there?
Yeah, Polycam is the name of this one.
Do you like it?
It seems to, yeah, I like it so far. I wish that it had more count. I think it's only going to like 50,000 or something like that. But this processed in 50 seconds on the iPad Pro.
Yeah, it's
just pretty amazing. And this whole scan took about maybe 2 minutes to do a room.
And John Preda, what are you using? What are you showing there?
Sorry, I was muted. This is 3D Scan, Alex.
Yeah.
This is the one that you recommended, and I use it every day.
Yeah, it's so the 3D Scanner app is a pretty slick one as well. So Polycam, 3D Scanner app, Sitescape. 3D Scanner app threatens to, it's got something there to sign up for it's got a place to sign up for 3D Scanner app Pro. And so I'm pretty excited about that and hoping that they'll add what's really missing in all of these apps right now is I'll keep talking about it until it happens, which is the integration of structured light, which is the LiDAR, and unstructured light, which is the photos. So when they get to a point where they're measuring a bunch of data and then adding photos where they can add detail to it at the same time, you're going to get incredibly high resolution, or the potential for incredibly high resolution, and very, very accurate at the same time. The photos can provide resolution, but not accuracy. The LiDAR provides accuracy, but not resolution. And so the two of them in one device that you can hold with your hand is very powerful. It'll take a lot longer to process. It won't be instant. It'll be something you get all the LiDAR information, and then you let it go cook for an hour, and it'll come back with something that's got a lot of data. So those are the things that I think are going to be interesting. Go ahead, Paul, and then
Is
Stuart.
it the one?
Oh,
sorry, is it the one with the TM after it in the App Store? Is it 3D Scanner app TM?
It's 3D Scanner app. It's the one with the little house. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Maybe they added the TM because the other one. Anyway, so it's got the little house, not the one with the blocks. That next one that you see with the little purple one with the blocks is right below it. Not good.
Thanks, Alex.
Yep.
Thanks for recognizing. Just a kind of a follow-on question. Google Places uses a traditional photography model for creating walkarounds inside. Do you think LiDAR will be able to also generate those Google walkarounds?
Yeah.
They call it Google Places.
Yeah, it's going to be better. And Google had it better for a while. They had cameras that had LiDAR in them, so they gave up on that because of. I will say, you start scanning a lot, you'll see why. Is that the battery life goes to the ground really fast. LiDAR is expensive from a power consumption perspective. Go ahead, Stuart.
Just for everybody to know what comes afterwards, what software do all of those applications export to? Is it just to Google SketchUp, or is it to Maya?
No,
is it to Max?
So
is it to DAZ?
Most of these will export OBJ. Some of them will export. I think that 3D Scanner app will export STL, OBJ, USDZ, all the, and like 10 other apps. So getting it into anything that you want to is generally pretty straightforward. So you can export it out. OBJ will get you into everything, right? I mean, pretty much. And then USDZ is going to be important as Apple keeps on rolling USDZ out. So imagine, again, we're in early days. The apps, the resolution is pretty low, but the possibility is there to, I want to take this little item here, this little thing, and I want to digitize it and throw it into my motion project and rotate it around as an example of something. That can be, that's going to be able to be done soon, very, very easily inside of something, so you can literally take your phone, scan something, throw it into motion, animate it around. Again, the resolution isn't amazing. What you may end up doing is taking it into a 3D app and using that as a template for you to build something that's more efficient as far as where it puts curves. Go ahead, Stuart.
I'm actually thinking more on storyboards and what have you. You could literally go out to a location, scan a room, drop some 3D characters into a scene, like where you want the actors to move through, light it, and literally show the actors that as your storyboards, and that will give them a real heads up or leap forward in what they need to be doing physically for their performance.
For many of our projects, we do that in SketchUp, where we did it even before we had LiDAR, which is that we would take a bunch of photos, I'd hand it to somebody, they'd build a 3D model of the entire space in SketchUp, and then we'd throw people in and we'd figure out when we had a whole library of all of our cameras and all of our lights and all of our tripods and everything else, and you just drop it all in. And the two things is A, we can show the client exactly what it looks like, but two, we know if it'll fit. That this is our Ace tripod, this is our F3 camera, this is whatever we were using. We were able to do that really quickly. Go ahead, Guy, and then Alex, and then we'll come back to Stuart, and then we'll go.
Yeah, I was going to say the cool thing about this app, the Polycam app, is that this is the mesh file export formats, and one of them here is share in iMessage, exports a USDZ file. So yesterday after I did this scan, I walked over to the guy that's in charge of building this room out and airdropped it to him, and he opened it up just right in preview on his Mac laptop. And it was cool to just have him rotating it around, and the joy that he saw, like he got it, like, oh my gosh, this is cool. How do we get higher resolution now?
Well, and also the thing is that it comes in scale when you scan it. So if you scan a room, I was showing someone else to it in their house, and I scanned one of the upstairs rooms and then texted it to them. When they popped it open, it showed up in their kitchen, but because the LiDAR knows what's in front and what's in back of where it should be, it started doing the composite. And what you ended up with, when you looked through the phone, you saw a composite of their upstairs and their kitchen. Like whatever was closer in the kitchen was there, and the rest of the room was behind it. It was a very like surreal mashup. So you can send things to people. Like, so if you wanted to send something from a historical site or something to your friends, or something like you're at the Louvre or you're at something else, you can go like this, grab it, send it to them. Like, this is what I'm experiencing. When they pop it open, it will come in at full size, you know, and they can kind of wander around it. Go ahead. You know, and we're talking about a little bit longer here because it's a really exciting technology that's going to be, we're really in early stages, but I would highly recommend playing with it. Guy, and then Stuart, and then Alex. I know Alex.
So to get the best resolution, like what would a total pro who I paid to do this, would it be that BLK 360 or that Ferrocam, or what's kind of the process, and what app would come after that at the highest level?
Well, okay, the highest level, you're probably looking at something like a ZNF 5110. You know, ZNF is the highest level, you know, or one of the highest levels, but that's $80,000. So let me be clear, when we're talking about that, it's got a range of, I think, 500, I want to say 500 yards or something like that. It's like a really powerful, and it's really high resolution, million points a second. You know, it's very, very powerful. The problem is, for us, it's mostly big. So you have to take a 1650. If you go one step down to a Faro 350, which is about $50,000, and you can rent them for $250 a day or $500 a day or something. So you don't have to buy one. I rent them. And so the place out of Texas. Anyway, the Faro 350 is going to do 80% of what the ZNF will do, but it's way more portable. You can get it into a 1510. You can do it as a carry-on, you know, if you're going to put it on a plane. So that is and it's very accurate. You really decide how much time you have to be for the scanning. The BLK 360 fits in your backpack. So as far as and it works really easily. It works with your iPad. You just pop it open and run it. You can just even hit the button if you've already got it preset, and it'll just start scanning. So the ease of use on the BLK 360 is really good. It's about 18,000, 16,000, something in that range. And again, you can rent these. You know, so you can rent these for relatively inexpensive for a day, or whatever, scan stuff. And so for most of what we do, the BLK is fine. The fact that it's not it's a little bit less accurate. We're talking millimeters, you know, within a room of being less accurate, and it's a little slower is totally fine. So I would say those are the three big scanners that you jump up to as far as location scanning. BLK doesn't work very well outside. You know, it's much better inside than it is outside. And so, I mean, it works, but it doesn't work as well as the others. It doesn't have nearly the range. It doesn't have nearly the accuracy, but for site surveys, it's perfect. And I've done lots and lots of site surveys with BLK because Brent Schnarr, who's sometimes in here and listening, has one. So Brent lends it to me, or he did before he left San Francisco. Anyway, or he didn't leave San Francisco. He's here, but he's using it. So anyway, Alex.
Just to say that Google Places, which used to be a place where you would actually get your 360 stills camera and a series of them and create a load of links to tours and stuff like that, that's now moved and gone over to Google's museum and location and education platform. So maybe we might be able to talk about that in the second hour.
Well, and I think that, we'll talk about it more, but I think that LiDAR and gathering that data from a museum perspective is pretty interesting. You know, I think that, and we'll talk about it more in the second hour, but I think that museums really have to look at what they have to offer. And we haven't seen anybody be less interested in going to a museum because they saw digital versions of what they have. You know, it usually just means they just want to go to it more. Stuart?
Yeah, just Google SketchUp has a great price. So does DAZ Studio. DAZ Studio uses a CUDA-based renderer called iRay. So if you need to render out scenes or lights and what have you, it's very accurate. And I was going to ask John if he wouldn't mind sharing the scan he just took of his room, but he's now no longer in his chair.
Yeah, maybe I'll publish it. But yeah, but I'll post some scans that I can do while I'm here, and so people can kind of see what that is. It's still pretty rough. DAZ is just very unstable, in my opinion, at least on the Mac side. It's just you're just kind of oof, you know, so it's been just a weird, the only thing that was more.
Oh, it's weird. It's definitely weird, but on the PC with a NVIDIA card,
it works pretty well.
Yeah, really well.
I mean, for us, we've been mostly around SketchUp. It's just been the thing that we use for most of those things. Go ahead, Courtney.
Just to clarify something you said earlier, you said when you scan a room and you send it to someone, it comes in actual size and they can wander around in it. Is it using a phone or a tablet's accelerometer to determine where they are in the 3D?
Yeah.
So you have to have a pretty good space to wander around.
If they move around, as soon as they give it a little parallax, it kind of knows where it's at. It'll slip a little bit if they don't have LiDAR, but if you send it to somebody else who has an iPhone 12, then it'll pop right in and they'll know exactly where they are inside.
So does it use the LiDAR in the local phone when you're viewing it to determine distances and things?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
It's pretty amazing. But if you don't have that, if you just move your phone back and forth, as soon as it gets some parallax, it'll do a pretty good job. The LiDAR just closes the last 10%.
Using the camera, not the accelerometer then. Yeah. I see. Okay.
Next question.
Moving on to Guy Cochran. I managed to double hit something. Let me go look at it over here. What's the best? No, I didn't. I'm sorry. I think I made an error there. I'm going to Jeff Francis for a second. Columbia, South Carolina, Mac to SDI. When to choose Blackmagic Design UltraStudio Monitor versus Blackmagic Design HDMI to SDI microconverter. The relative merits of each.
Yeah, go ahead, Nikki.
So yeah, it depends what your source is, what you're playing out from. The mini studio monitor can output 10-bit, and the doing the like HDMI out of your Mac going into an HDMI to SDI converter. It would depend on your Mac's capability and what it can output, like, and at what resolution, and also at what frame rate. I think the modern Macs now can do 10-bit at I think up to 60 frames per second at 4K, but it would vary depending on what Mac you have.
Go ahead, Victor.
Yeah, I'm using the Blackmagic 3G Thunderbolt 3 one, and it does 10-bit as well. It's worked flawlessly.
The one thing about the monitor one, we've been using some 8K, the 8K monitor out or whatever, and it has calibration tools in it. You don't need to have the calibration, but it's got a USB in the front, and you can hook a sensor to it to calibrate your monitor, which is pretty useful. So if you want to calibrate a consumer monitor or a consumer-ish monitor, you can plug the sensor into the USB-C in the front and point it, put it on the TV, and it'll do what the spider will do, but it'll do it to your monitor. So if the signals, you got an SDI signal going into it, it's HDMI into the TV, but then you can it has tools, and it'll say like, there's like 3 of them. There's like the cam spectra, and there's 3 different options that you can use to have a sensor that will allow you to calibrate the monitor from there as well. So it's got that's a lot more feature than what you would have normally. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, also, I think the monitors all have scopes built into them, and the mini converters don't. So if you want to see scopes, the monitor is the way to go.
Yep. Next question.
Moving on to Dan Huber of Erie, Pennsylvania. Has anyone utilized the Zoom watermark in their meetings or webinars? Is it visible during the meeting only if someone tries to take a screenshot?
I think you can have one where it has their name on it, right? There's a security feature that'll have their name kind of bouncing around in their view, and it should be visible on a screen capture. So if they wanted to record it and then share it with others, it makes it less fun, to do that. So, but I don't know. I haven't used it at all. Next question.
Next question, moving on to Eric Hall of Mount Vernon, Washington. What's the most foolproof least components to troubleshoot way to establish a 24/7 HD stream, which can be shared on a website page with related content?
It's the fish cam again, folks. Sorry.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
So what I actually do have a 24/7 stream going, and what I have is a machine down in my basement, and that is going to Restream. Restream is going to Twitch and YouTube and sometimes Facebook, sometimes Periscope. You basically can then just set up like OBS or Wirecast or vMix to it, and then set up a camera and run it 24/7 if you need to.
That's the least foolproof.
There's never going to be a foolproof. You're going to have to attend to it on a daily, depending on your internet. That's usually when my problems happen, is when I have an internet issue, and then it just takes the stream down. You just have to go in via a remote desktop app and restart it. So
is there a way to do it with only, you know, just ASIC based hardware in the loop and no computer required?
Not
I
to
would
my
say an
knowledge.
ATEM Mini Pro and embed the YouTube, window in your website.
I mean, you can. There's definitely there are cards, and I'll have to find out what they are. They're about $200 or $300 that are still that are very basic, but are capable of doing streaming. And I mean, actually streaming in 4K. That you could probably put in a video HDMI in, and then punt, have it stream an RTMP stream out using. In this case, it'll be a little geeky because it'll be like FFmpeg, kind of an roll your own FFmpeg. I mean, you might want to look at things like Streamline on GitHub. That's Colleen Henry's little project. And so you could, install it. We could. Colleen Henry will be the one that knows how to do that, with little cards. And so I'll see if I can ping her and find out.
Yeah, not foolproof enough yet. Sorry. If we involve a computer and software and all that kind of thing, it just makes it hard to troubleshoot from remotely if there is a problem. Say there's a drop in the stream. I mean, we're depending on hatchery attendants to bring it up again.
Yeah, but what I normally do is I get something like TeamViewer, because there are free licenses for personal use, and I use TeamViewer to log into that. Otherwise, you can use something like Epiphan has something, and of course, Cerevo, I think, is another company. Mm-hmm. And both of them do that, but if you need to have remote control, if there's a problem, they won't offer that option.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead, John Preto.
So Eric, this camera here is an access camera. It's got a web server built into it, fully contained.
But your source is underwater, right, Eric?
So they have enclosures for water as well. These guys have been around for 20 years. Mm-hmm. And you've got full FTP, you've got storage locally, you got Ethernet, you've got all kinds of options with access.
And they do make a housing, you say, John?
Yes.
I'd love to know about that. Yeah, that sounds good.
Go access.com.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Does Dropcam still exist as a service where you could just drop a cam somewhere? And
yeah, it's just that it goes through a web server, and it does work. It's expensive. Like it'll add up if you're doing a lot of it. And I don't think it goes underwater. I don't think you can take a drop.
Well, you'd always probably have to build some kind of underwater interface for it if it's not too deep. But,
yeah. But yeah, otherwise it would put it on the cloud. But you can't really RTMP it, I don't think. I think it's just like records the cloud solution. So, but yeah, I mean, we've had Mac Minis stream for months. So it's like once you get it going, we just had to just sit there and I got a video in, I push a video out. I'm not saying that it will never stop, but we never stopped it. Like it just sat there, and we had like a little camera that was pointed out of the street, and it just was our little test, and it was just running. It ran on to YouTube for months.
So a dedicated computer. I wonder if I could do it with a Raspberry Pi.
You might be able to. As you make it smaller, it will be less stable. Yeah, so you can do it with a Raspberry Pi. I'm sure you can save some money, but it'll just be it's time versus money. In that sense, I don't think it'll be as stable.
But it'll be water cooled.
Exactly. Next question.
Moving on to join us, Tal of Reutlingen. As a first-time Mac user, is there something I should do when setting up a Mac Mini?
I don't think there's anything that is. Yeah, go ahead, Stuart.
What era Mac Mini? Because the setup for the new ones will be completely different to the setup of the old ones.
I'm going to assume it's the new one because it's getting one now. So the assume now. I mean, get it. You got to decide if you're going to put your iCloud. If you haven't used a Mac before, then you have to create an iCloud account, and otherwise, once you get it in there, things move pretty quickly. If you've already had Macs, it's pretty easy to set up. What I never do is move one computer to another. I always install everything cleanly. I find that moving things over, is a recipe for disaster, just because they're not the same computer as they were before. And I know that's supposed to work, but it never does. Bill and then Nikki.
Macs are pretty bulletproof in terms of you can get into them and just start double clicking and launching things. Command Z is your friend, which is undo. So that will usually take you back unless you've done launched something big, but you really can't hurt them. So first timers who are coming to the interface for the first time, be a little bold, try things, see what works, and you won't get into too much trouble.
Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, I agree with Alex. Like, figure out if you want iCloud to do its thing, because it is capable of dynamically removing and copying files in and out of your iCloud drive and your actual physical like drive on your machine. So I personally don't want iCloud to do that for me, so I always turn that off. Because sometimes I find myself in a place where there's no connectivity and I don't have the files. And also if you are going to use this for production work, I would turn off sleep, because a lot of apps don't like your machine to sleep, but read the documentation of your apps. Yeah.
Next question.
Moving on, next comes from Paul Wallace in the panel in Austin, Texas. Any thoughts on airmeet, a Zoom wannabe? They have an intriguing way of matching up people in rooms based on their interests. Has anyone tried it?
Go ahead, John.
We met with them this week, Leland and I, and they're charging per user per day for their platform. And we thought it was exorbitantly expensive, that model.
Go ahead, Paul.
I attended an airmeet last night. It was the Austin founders group, and it worked okay. The most interesting thing was that they let you pick a room. There was like an Austin room, a Houston room, a San Antonio room, a room for different interests. And there was also a feature where it would let you, you said, match me up with people like me, and then it would go around and find the people like you, and put all those people in a room. But the rest of it was very clunky. I mean, when I wanted to switch cameras, it was like 7 clicks, and then everything got muted and I had to unmute. So it's a work in progress for sure. And like John said, maybe it's cost prohibitive also.
Yeah, let's keep saying it. I don't know if single events is really the future, but and so we built a lot of these apparatuses trying to reproduce something that we did. And again, I think that even I do think that breakout rooms, when they get into webinars, is going to be a pretty powerful thing, because you can, exactly to Paul's point, you can choose rooms. You can decide what room I want to go to, and go have those discussions and come back. And so I think that I think Zoom can probably solve some of these problems with a couple upgrades, where they're going to be able to make a lot of this stuff work. So go ahead, Jeffrey.
The cool thing about this one, and we were talking about another one a week or two ago that I saw that with as well. The cool thing about those is they have online events that you can attend for free and be able to judge for yourself what you like and what you don't like about their conference or their app software. So that would be a great way to kind of test the waters, is just to go to some of these events and see what they're doing and what they're working on.
Go ahead, John Preto.
So here's my opinion on these popping up platforms. Is it's all about infrastructure and reliability. I'm not going to bet my reputation on one of these platforms that pops up. We've been on Zoom almost 250 days in a row, and it's been down one day out of 250, which is, I don't know, 3 9s probably, Mr. Edelson, something like that. So Zoom is spending a lot of money on infrastructure, and that's where I put my money, other than all these platforms that are popping up. And they said at Zoomtopia that breakouts are coming first quarter to web.
Yep. Yeah, that's great. Good, Alex.
I do use the example of the Final Cut Pro Creative Summit, which is happening this week. One of the reasons why I didn't sign up for it was that it wasn't clear what I'd be getting apart from the actual sessions. Because the sessions, I'm big-headed enough to think that I might not learn that much of those sessions about Final Cut. I know that's bad, but I also wanted to know in practice what it does coffee mean? What does it mean meeting people? And actually, this event is actually one of the toughest ones because in practice, would I meet people from the Final Cut team wandering around, and how would I meet them, and how would I get to talk to them, and how would they get to walk away from me or not walk away from me, and how would we create our ad hoc little groups in which would bring other people in to talk about something? And I'd more likely to sign up for something and pay for something if I know roughly what that's going to be like.
Well,
and then it would actually be Apple people attending, and those people from Apple, and that would actually, I'll have to believe it. And that's probably one of the toughest possible examples.
So this is the argument against all of these. So what you're talking about here is that doing a single event, everyone's, by the end of the event, they kind of get what they were going to get. Like they finally understand what was there. The reason that it's so powerful to have daily events in our case, but weekly events or monthly events, is that the audience learns not only what is going to be available, but what's possible and they learn a pattern of behavior. So doing things that are regular makes a huge difference compared to doing one-offs, because the audience is just barely getting what they, what's done by the end of the event. So what we talk to clients about over and over and over again is do something over and over and over again. Stop doing this thing where we're going to do everything in a quarter, and do something every week where you're going to figure out how to do it better. The audience is going to figure out how to do it better. Everyone's going to, everyone gets better at it together. The reason that this conversation works is because we're doing it all the time, and we've kind of learned a pattern that worked for us. Okay, we're gonna keep moving. We're running out of time. Next question.
Okay, moving. This is the single longest one we've ever had, I think, submitted. So I'll try to read parts of it.
It actually, Paul, congratulations. There's going to be a limit to word count within the next week. And it's all because of this question. I looked at this question and I was like, what? I pinged Chris and I just went, what is the maximum word count on our questions? Because this one is too long. So anyway, we'll read it out, but everyone enjoy this one because this will be the only one that's ever this long.
Okay, I got to get ready here and warm up my voice. Here we go. Paul Wallace asks, this is partly directed to Jeffrey Powers. Do you think South by Southwest will be able to pull off a decent virtual event using Zoom? Price of admission has been lowered to $149. What features should they incorporate in the virtual event? Note, only 4 days instead of 10 on March 16th to 20. There will be panels, mentor sessions. The digital experience includes conference keynotes, features, speakers, and sessions. Mentor sessions and workshops, film festival, exclusive premieres, screenings and Q&As, music festival showcases and events, comedy festival showcases and podcasts, online exhibitions, networking meetups, and other opportunities for professional development.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Dogs and cats living together, mass hysteria. So, okay, here's the deal. First of all, and this is all we might also.
You got like a minute. You got like a minute.
I'll try.
You're gonna have to.
There's a lot of information here.
I don't care.
But the bottom line is there are events, including CES, where there's a group of people that are trying to work their ways to get there to do the show from the location. And I've heard that South by Southwest, they're doing that. Second of all, music is actually in jeopardy because there's a lot of people that don't pay for South by Southwest badges. And so they definitely won't be virtual. They definitely won't be paying $149 for that. Comedy showcases video. I think they've got that all nailed down on how they're going to do that. So that's going to be great. There's going to be no problems. The digital part of it, that's still in a little bit of question, but they're spreading it out and they're doing a great job on doing it, just like you said, Alex, by spreading it out a little bit longer. Even though the conference is 4 days, it's going to be a few weeks with different items. So,
and that's good.
I mean, it's going to be okay.
And Jeffrey, will you buy a ticket?
I usually go as press. So
I've spoken South by Southwest quite a few times, and even my first one was, I think, in 1989 or 1990 when it wasn't nearly what it is now. And anyway, but what I'll say is that a vast majority of the things that I spoke at I think would be better on Zoom than they would be in the room. Like, we were all sitting in the room. The rooms are never that good. It's all laid out badly, and there's a bad video camera in the background, and there's all this other stuff. And so I think I would rather go to it in Zoom than in person. I do think that anytime someone someone says multiple tracks to me, I'm like, you should just make it longer. Like, why make us choose between 8 things every hour? And so when I see it condensed, just from your question, when I see it condensed, I go, I don't know why they did that, because they could have just made it the South by Southwest experience for a quarter. Could have been something that they could have done, or just make it all year. I mean, that's what VidCon is doing. That's what and Jim Lauterbach's a pretty smart guy, and so they're kind of moving that out. They may end up having a physical event, but doing something that's the experience that lasts all year, that has discussions all year, makes them relevant. relevant all year. Go ahead, Stuart, really quickly, and then
The barbecue is not as good in Zoom. You know.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah, but Zoom does give them a real opportunity, and they're not looking at it when they have a price that is out of reach of the majority of people outside of the US for a Zoom event like this. They should be splitting up the events to things that they can sell off cheaply to as many people as possible. And instead of just having attendees from the US who can make it in person, have attendees from the whole world. Okay, $149 US is about 300 Australian, and I'm sure that's out of reach for a lot of indie filmmakers here. I'm sure Baiju would say that that's out of reach for a lot of Indian independent filmmakers who are on even limited budgets. Right? Open it up to everyone. Be realistic about the prices, split it up, and grow the event massively, because you've got an opportunity to break the market while everybody else is twiddling their thumbs.
Well, I think the other thing is that just think about how you break it up, so that some things there's a one subscription that's $300, there's another subscription that's $150, there's some stuff, there's lots of content that's free, and again, that break it up into a different layers. Okay, we're gonna move on. Next question. We're running out of time.
Okay, Chris Fenwick in Sacramento. If I may, I'd love to ask a question about recording multiple Zoom cameras simultaneously, and I have a few slides to show.
So the question, Alex, and I know how you do your thing with the point-to-points, and it's brilliant, and it's absolutely the best way to do it. But another way to do it, I saw a guy's video the other day, and he was showing how he was using ATEM mini ISOs as a recorder. So he set up a Zoom room, I believe, and then you take 2 feeds off of that computer, and by doubling up the number of computers, you could actually record 4 separate feeds, because you could pin 2 people on each of the computers. You don't get all the fancy comm stuff that you do, which I love, but you could record 4 feeds on one ATEM ISO. And I was wondering if you or Guy had any input on that.
Looks possible.
Yeah, I would say it looks good. The example may require a really fast machine though, because when you're driving 2+, so in the back end, if you go to zoom.us, you can actually set up what happens when you have 1 monitor, 2 monitors, or 3 monitors. It's kind of hidden. You got to go in there and kind of dig, and then you get it set up. But what I found on older machines is that it just doesn't have the oomph to drive 3 displays. So you want to make sure that you're using a computer that's beefy enough. And then, you can do the pinning, especially now. You can even do the pinning remotely. And this is why I'm excited about putting Zoom rooms up in the cloud, because imagine being able to suck this down, have somebody else remotely working on it and not have to be physically there. So you can pin from the controller. Yeah. So if you have multiple people coming in, you can have somebody else work on it.
Does it matter if the ATEM is going to show up to the Mac as a 1920 by 1080 monitor? Will that make it easier for the computer to be able to send 2 1920 by 1080 monitors?
It just depends on the computer. Now, one thing that I'm getting is I'm going ahead and getting a Mac Mini specifically to test this, because I just want to see if I can do it with a Mac. I think the new Mac Mini will probably be powerful enough to do these dual outputs, as well or better than the Dells that we're using right now. But I think that you could. Anyway, it's possible. We're going to keep moving because we're running out of time.
No,
but I think that I think the answer when you really start getting into these, like, we're going to try to figure this out, is the cloud more than an ATEM Mini. That's my thing, is like, if you're not going to do it in like heavy hardware the way I do it, and even my style, one of the things I'm going to be experimenting with between now and the end of the year for records, specifically to what you're talking about, is getting that all into AWS. Now that the rooms have a web interface, if I can control it with a web interface and I can get a room running on an AWS instance, getting it up there to be able to do those records, I think is going to be pretty useful. But it's not for, I wouldn't do it for a live show yet, but I would do it for that. Anyway, next question. We're going to keep moving. Sorry, guys. We're going to run out of time. I'm trying not to bleed into the second hour as much as we have been earlier this week. So we'll answer all the rest of the questions in the next 2 minutes before we get to museums. Go ahead, question.
Trevor Walker in Rosamond, California. Any tips on tracking down hum in a system? I think it's a ground loop hum, but everything is plugged into a single surge protector. Has anyone used a backup supply to help clear up noise? Also, is a recommended XLR pair to 3.5 to go into the ATEM?
Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, start from the very top of your audio chains and unplug things one by one and figure out which device when the hum goes away, which device you unplug.
Next question.
Moving on to Jeffrey Reyes, Bronx, New York. Alex, you're a big fan of Dolby HDR. What are your thoughts on the VISA HDR standard?
I don't even know what the VISA HDR standard is. So I think that you'd have to be VISA. To me, a VISA is a mount. I don't know what I'm not clear of that one. So ask that another day. I don't have an answer for that because I'm not sure what it is. Next question.
Moving into Christian Dior's final question from South Florida. For those that are using OBS Studio, what are some helpful plugins that are used frequently, like NDI Virtual Cam and any type of VST2 plugins? For example, I found Uline Loudness Meter to be useful for setting LUFS values.
Go ahead, John.
I'm not a fan of any of the plugins for OBS, and the virtual cam only runs on Windows. It does not work on the Macintosh, but I like to keep my OBS absolutely clean.
Okay, now we're going to shift gears a little late. I'm trying to pull that back in. We started leaking way into the next hour with the Q&A, mostly because I'm on a laptop and I can't see it as well, and so I'm going to work on the interface that we have for the back end so I can see what's going on. So I'm not tracking the time very well. So anyway, I apologize for it running over, but I know some of you have come in to talk about this and that it's an important subject, and I think it is an important subject for a lot of folks. We're talking to a lot of different organizations and locations about, what they're doing. And I felt like so many seem to be struggling that it might be worth at least, having a discussion about it for us to start thinking about it. Because I think my opinion is if I wasn't so busy right now, where I would be really focusing my energy is actually on museums and cultural centers, primarily because they're empty. So I've had to shoot in a lot of these locations, and it is a nightmare to do all the work that I would like to do, or all the things that I want to do with all those people in the way. So, and I either have people or I have time frames. We had to load into the Smithsonian, and we had a 7 o'clock show, and I didn't have access to the room until 5:30 because that's when they close it or whatever. And so an hour and a half to set up. And I was like, we could have done a lot more if we'd had more time. And so, and in a place like that, I always think about, it'd be great to digitize, and the Smithsonian actually does a pretty good job of digitizing everything. But the thing is that when I think about the museums and about Monterey, the Monterey Aquarium is one of my favorite places in the world. And so but when I think about those things, I think about there's all these places to explore virtually, and some of them are doing it, but I feel like there's a lot more we could do. And so I thought that it'd be useful to, kind of kick it around and have us just start thinking about it. And maybe, a lot of times we've had things in here that we started kicking around, and next thing you know, it's happening somewhere. So, and I know that some of you are working on some of those locations. I know John Idelson's connected with a lot of folks that are doing this kind of thing. And I think that Parks is another good example. I think John Idelson's team is already doing a lot of that, but I think that there's a lot of, I think there's so much that could be done with kind of virtual hiking and so on and so forth. And then John Gill, you work at a museum. Is that correct?
So I do work. I'm a freelancer, but I do work with museums.
And what kind of work do you do with them?
So at the moment, I'm doing learning resources for schools. So I suppose we're in a bit of a peculiar situation just now that you can get to museums, you can go to museums. Sorry, I'm probably going away from the mic here. So you can visit museums, but because of physical distancing, you have to book. So it's less convenient. So you can't get up on Saturday morning and think, let's go to the museum today. Mm-hmm. You probably needed to book a couple of days before to get your slot, and then there'll be a time slot that you're limited. So and then added to that, the learning development people are not able to get schools into the building in the numbers that they would before. So one of the things I'm helping with is I'm helping them make video resources so that they can either do live stuff or they can send out video resources for kids to watch. And then they're getting learning packs so that when they do come in, then they know exactly what they're going to see.
Right.
I suppose one of the things I'm interested in is, which happened a couple of years ago with the National Museum in Edinburgh, was that the BBC in Scotland made a documentary. There was an exhibition at the museum about 80s pop music in Scotland, and BBC Scotland made a documentary about it, and the documentary was premiered at the opening night of the exhibition before it was on TV. And then that made me think, well, that's a good way of teasing what's on the the exhibition. Not enough people are going to see these exhibitions as it is, but even more so now, to incentivize people to make the effort to pre-book and to get out. Why not do little sort of videos? And actually, one in Edinburgh has done that just now for the Harryhausen exhibition that's on the National Gallery.
And I would argue that I wouldn't even be trying to draw people in as much as figuring out how to get them engaged with the content that is in the cultural center, or and figure out in this moment, how do they become part of that conversation, knowing that, I mean, again, the constant fear that we get into when we get into conversations with cultural clients is they're afraid that if they put a bunch of videos and a bunch of other things up, that people they'll watch those and then not want to come visit. That we get this a lot, and we have not seen that actually happen. In fact, the opposite happens almost all the time, which is that if you see a bunch of content, it becomes kind of your mecca. Like that someday you're going to go to that location and see those things. And people, when you visit San Francisco, you're more likely to go to X, Y, and Z because you saw about it and you know about it and it means something. Like if you, I talked about it a little earlier this month that my father, for instance, knows a lot about Civil War battlefields. He likes studied a lot of it. It's really fun to go. Like when I was a kid, we used to go to battlefields, but it was just a bunch of fields otherwise. There's nothing to see, except for a couple statues, except for the fact that the context, the stories, everything else there. And I think that's what, could be done. I love going to those kinds of things, historical things and different kinds of tours, but I find that I'm much more engaged ahead of time if I knew a lot more about it, and I think that's if I already have all that information, I went to the Tower of London, and I think I spent a day studying it before I went. That's kind of how I operate about these things. But the idea is I wanted to, if I'm going to be in London and I'm going to go to the Tower of London, I actually want to know what I'm looking at, rather than just wandering around and going, oh, that's pretty, and so that's the kind of the approach. And places that I've been able to go over and over again, I saw something incredible. I studied the heck out of it, came back and got to see it again. And then it's much more meaningful. And I think that's what, and again, we have this opportunity because the place is empty to 10 hours a day, 12 hours a day, stream from sections, or empty-ish, stream from sections where you can do that. Go ahead, Paul.
Yeah, I live in what's called the Museum District in Austin. And if I look out my window, as you see the domed building, that's the Texas History Museum. And directly across from that is the Blanton Museum of Art. And I volunteer there sometimes. And basically what the volunteers do is when people come to the museum, they have to pay. So they check their, make sure they've made payment and all that. And that's about it. But wouldn't it be great if you could find an expert on that museum and mic them up and have them have a camera and take you on a tour through that museum during this COVID age? Wouldn't that be fantastic?
Wouldn't it be? And wouldn't it, and when we start like thinking about it, like for me, wireless wandering through the thing is part of it. Also being able to theoretically pull things up. If I'm going to show you a statue, wouldn't it be great if I could rotate it around? The viewers can rotate that statue. Not that hard right now. If you think about those things, they can rotate around and talk and again, the interactivity is key. One of the things we see a lot of is live streams without any interactivity. You got to figure out how you're going to do Q&A with the people that are watching so that they can, drive that. Go ahead. Courtney, and then Bill, and then Alex.
Yeah, you could attract people with, take the movie trailer concept and just get some really good docents that know the material and just do a few highlights of some of the more, best parts of the collection to attract people in, and then then when the stream happens, or when if you want to bring them actually into the museum, then they'll be enticed to come in. Is that a 3D object you're rotating?
You're rotating a 3D object around.
Yeah, there you go.
And that's a USDZ model. I don't know if you can hear me, Guy.
Sorry, I was muted. Yeah, this is the one off the Apple site. That's from the Met. This is like a really high resolution scan. I mean, if I go,
yeah,
this is insane how close this.
And that's using photogrammetry typically, for
got a little lion meat in between his teeth.
Yeah, yeah. So but those are the kind of things that it's hard to get access to those things and to do those, and again, it by itself is really cool as an example, but also there's a real opportunity to have someone talking about it. So you can listen to it, you can download it, we can talk about it. It might be something we experiment with too. Go ahead, Bill.
And as mentioned, all museums of any substance have docent programs, or they've got people who are specifically trained to describe the objects there. And to Alex's point earlier about the fact that it doesn't cut down on the traffic to the actual museum, I'm surprised they even think that way. Because if I'm going to San Francisco and somebody says, let's go to the de Young, I don't even know what that is. I don't know what kind of collection they have. I don't know whether there might be anything inside of it that I might be interested in. But you put these live virtual events out there, and suddenly I'm excited by the opportunity to see a collection in a particular place when I can get there. I just think it's flipped.
Yeah, go ahead, Alex.
And also museums have locations that they can get people to that they don't normally get people to. So, for example, the London Transport Museum had these things called Hidden London tours, where you can go and visit, in the past, before all this, real underground stations, tube stations that have been abandoned, and old tram lines that are no longer have any trams on them, but that you can still go down, climb down 100 feet down a spiral staircase, and they show you around these wartime tube stations. Now they call them virtual Hidden London tours, in which they play back during a Zoom exclusive footage that hasn't been seen before, while somebody speaks about what they're saying. An expert speaks, and then there's a Q&A afterwards, and they last 90 minutes, and they charge £20 for them, and they have them every few days for the next couple of months. So I put a link in the in Makana to show what they're doing.
And I will argue that the most effective, when possible, is to do it live, all live, no playback, no nothing, unless it's historical that is not there. But having someone at that location talking to people about it is very, now you might have some videos that they see beforehand. Again, if you can find ways in a player to give them USDZ or other things like that. But the point is that, we did one with divers. We've done a couple with divers, and divers underwater in schools and classrooms, really popular. Just in case your kids love talking to divers that are in a reef. Just in case you're wondering, like, what is that? What is that? How does that work? What does that look like? And the key is it's not a video that they're watching. They're sitting there talking to a diver who's in a reef, and they're like pointing things around, and they're moving things, and they're pulling it around and talking to them about it. Like, look at this. And it creates this sense of exploration that kids get super excited about. And then they get connected to those things, and people get excited about it. And the reason I wanted to at least start this conversation was that I just feel like I'm not seeing any of that, or seeing very little of it, from these centers. And I know that they're just panicked, and they're trying to figure out what to do, and they don't have a ton of money, and a lot of, but I just don't I'm just fascinated that I'm not seeing like this everywhere, because it'd be, people are stuck at home. There's lots of things to explore, and we're not doing that. Go ahead, Sky, and then Alex.
Well, your conversation about underwater also, didn't they do something like that from the space station?
Oh, we've done them in the space station. Yeah, I mean, it's and the space station is just as popular, and so the space station's harder because of the scheduling. You only get certain times, and it's a process. And NASA's, you get these little windows that make it harder to do. These other things you have a little bit more. But space station's a good one, but it's more infrastructure. These are the kind of things that I feel like people could do every day, all day. And again, it's just, when we did these events with other cultural centers, the biggest thing we were dealing with was crowds. Like, when can we do it? And we can't take it out of commission because people paid to go see it. So you can't tell people not to go into this section because they get upset because that's the reason they came or whatever it is. And as we kind of move towards where I have a feeling that for the next couple of months, we may get to a point where no one's going anywhere again, at least in the US, that, there's a huge opportunity to do some of this stuff. Go ahead, Alex.
The other thing is just to bear in mind, we were talking earlier about events coming back or live events coming back. What is an event but a 365 a day museum?
Yeah.
What are museums and events, and what are communities? So we have to start kind of merging and melding these together. So where you have an Apple technical conference where you've got a developer explaining how they made part of the operating system, that's a bit like a docent talking about how their expertise in terms of Victorian fashion. It's a matter of working out how these things actually work together and really how communities can be working in sync with each other and what we're all building and making.
Yep, absolutely. All right, next question.
Well, we've kind of been in the first question because this is pretty broad. As thousands of museums are scaling up their online and streaming offerings, is there a niche in which the specialized production and troubleshooting skills of this group could add value to these efforts? For example, as a resource for small and medium-sized institutions.
Yep, go ahead, Stuart.
Sure. We're already experimenting with the Lidar for the rooms. I actually put a link in the chat, well, 3 links in the chat a little earlier for a bloke by the name of Paul Nukala, who I've mentioned before as a FPV racer and freelance pilot and what have you. He's done some fly-arounds inside museums, creating the media that the museums are using on their own virtual tours and what have you. That's the sort of thing that we could be looking at all over the world, using a CineWhoop to fly around and get those overview shots, as long as you're a drone pilot and you've got the CineWhoops, and you can do it.
Most of the museums
they're
I've worked
designed
with,
for use in
I will admit that most of the museums I've worked with would not allow a drone to fly inside of them because of the
insurance
risks.
cost
Insurance would be
astronomical.
it would be a thing.
The
But
CineWhoops are a little different from most drones. They've got a full shield around the props.
But even then,
and they're
just
a little
the
bit
idea that they
safer.
tap into a Rembrandt would be really exciting. Anyway, John. Oh, you're muted. You're still muted, John. Very quiet. I don't know if you're muted, but you're very, very quiet.
Oh, any better now?
Yeah, better now.
Sorry about that. There's an organization called CILC, which is the Center for Interactive Learning and Collaboration. And I was on a call with them yesterday. It's a group that's trying to figure out how to do more of this. A number of museums didn't really have good Wi-Fi in their exhibit areas, so they're beginning to add it. So I think there are people trying to figure out how to do this within these organizations.
And again, like there's good Wi-Fi, but what I would say is that if you look at, as a museum, if you look at the overhead that it costs you to keep this thing there without anything happening, just run a video cable out from where you have Ethernet and then put up a Teradek bolt and have it go back to that area, rather than like upgrading the whole Wi-Fi and incorporating IT. There is like, get a wireless wireless transmitter, and you even put it on a coil and have that person wander around with it.
They've been doing it. We're the Railroad Museum and stuff, things like that. We've been talking about, little backpacks and things. So it's not impossible.
Right.
The other thing I'd say, you were talking earlier about, does having these events happen decrease people wanting to go? We have, with the ports project with California State Parks, it only increases the desire for people to come. If anything, they may make a decision to go from one place to a different place based on what they see. So it may say, gee, I'm not going to go to this one where I thought I was going to go, because I'm going to go to this one that I think's better. But nobody said, gee, I saw this, I'm just not going to go there.
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead, John.
Yeah, I was just going to echo that as well, that with social media especially, the first day of the opening of a big event, we've got the V&A Design Museum nearby now in Scotland, in Dundee in Scotland, and the idea that taking photographs or showing little videos of exhibitions is going to put people off. The thing that you can do, somebody mentioned trailer, and that was my point with the documentary, is that you can tease stuff in such a way that people want to see more, and you've got full control over it. It's not somebody taking a picture on a smartphone and sharing it on Twitter. Right. But the other thing I was going to mention was, I think one of the reasons, and this question is relevant to it, One of the reasons you're not seeing a lot of this stuff is because, in my experience, the museums I've worked with, they don't have people with the sort of the kind of expertise, knowledge, and understanding that this group has, and therefore it just hasn't occurred to them. Yeah. So the reason I work with the museums I work with is because, one, I reached out to them initially, and two, the people who work in museums, at least in the UK, it's quite a small network. So once you get in touch with one, somebody else in another museum hears what you've been doing, and so it spreads. So there's a huge opportunity for especially if you can do stuff that's relatively low cost, and isn't sort of heavily Wi-Fi dependent for some of the older museums, then there's tons of opportunities.
Yeah. And that's what again, why I wanted to kind of bring it up is that I think that many of us live in some city that has cultural resources that might have some budget to figure out how to do some of these things. And if we're trying to figure out if you have spare cycles, it may be worth reaching out to some of them and, figuring out what you can and, what you can do and what can be, part of that process. And so again, if it's something that I would be definitely focused on if I wasn't quite as busy as I am at the moment, would be going out and reaching out to these, because I feel like it's just such a low-hanging fruit, and it's something that will continue even after COVID, even after people start coming back to the museums. Having a strong digital skill set is only going to make the museum more successful, because that really is going to be the future. We are going to have a certain segment of this population that's really going to prefer doing more virtual things than they did before for the rest of their lives. They're not, some people hate it and want to go back to all these things, but not everybody, so, and I think that not everybody could be a pretty sizable group of people that, have found, especially as these technologies get better, have found that they prefer to virtually show up at things and then go to things that are special to them, but not do it all the time. Go ahead, John.
There's a NIA, which is the National Association of Interpretation. Right now with the California State Parks, we have a limitation on staff that are available. We're going to fill up all our electronic field trips for the rest of the school year, probably before this year ends. And so I think once you get past the technology part, then the next part is the wetware, how to get people to be able to do this effectively. And interpreters tend to be very good at explaining things and very good with people, but there's a transfer between doing that face-to-face and doing it in these new venues. Yeah. And getting those people trained and feeling comfortable is the next challenge.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Next question. And if you have other questions or comments about that, I mean, there's a lot of people discussing it, but if you have questions, make sure to pop them up. We don't have a ton left. We're just going to keep chewing on the ones we have. Go ahead. Next question. This will be my last one before I have to disappear and go to work. Go ahead.
Brody Hefner in New York City says, digitization of 3D objects in museum collections often uses computational photogrammetry systems defined by cultural heritage imaging, but image cloud rendering time is measured in hours and days. Will Lidar with photography for surface texture and color become the new standard?
It's not going to speed it up dramatically to get the kind of results that you're looking for. Photogrammetry is photogrammetry. It takes a long time for it to compute. It keeps speeding up with faster processors. But what I do think is that Lidar will make it easier for someone. So you might have something that's on, you might build a system in a museum or something that's on a turntable and it's really built for photogrammetry and it's well lit and you're doing your highest quality things there where you're just taking the photos. Lidar isn't going to necessarily change that because we were using laser scans before that, and photogrammetry is still going to give you finer detail, in those areas. But for many other things, there are, the photogrammetry mixed with Lidar is going to fix a lot of things. One of the things that photogrammetry is really not very good at is small spaces. So a small room, photogrammetry is really hard to do because you can't get enough overlap. So if you're in a room that's, so if you want to do a tour of, and Guy showed a little kitchenette there that was, or a little office area there, that's hard to do in pure photogrammetry because it's small. Now, Lidar tends to do it really well. So when we start to match these two together, if you want to build, for instance, a virtual tour of something, then you're really in a, that's where Lidar and photogrammetry could be married together, really, really effectively. And again, gathering lots of small objects. So you don't have the budget to put together a full photogrammetry kit or the time or the expertise. I think we're months away from being able to months or less than a year away, and now to some degree, but really as these tools get a lot better, being able to inexpensively go grab all the objects in a museum with an intern, like someone who doesn't have a ton of skill, isn't super expensive, and can go grab a bunch of stuff that they can throw up on the website that people can rotate around and enjoy, or throw into their, literally throw into their onto their desk, or throw into something in front of them. Those are all things that are very doable very soon. And we're already on a web page. If you go to a Safari page and you click on you go to Apple examples USDZ, just search that and go to that web page. And that's where I think Guy grabbed that statue. But you can grab all kinds of little things and just drop them into the room and look at them. It's stunning, And so what I would say is that people should be playing with that stuff and experimenting with it. And again, I think that it is a time right now where, especially now that we're kind of going back into a COVID push, where you get a lot of leeway to experiment right now. And so that's something for people to think about, is that there's time. Like, people will go, oh, they're just doing the best they can. I think trying to turn it into money quickly is dangerous. I think that you want to figure it out with people and get people to stay relevant, then figure out how that turns into something you can charge for. But I think that anyway, I think that's something that that the tools are coming very, very fast to do this really effectively. And Bill, I'm going to let you take it over, and then I'm going to disappear. See you guys. I will see you. I'll see you all tomorrow. I will be here the whole time tomorrow, as this is my last shoot day for this week. All right.
Yeah,
bye, guys.
You'll be back full time. Great.
Yep.
Thank you. I had my hand raised, so I'm going to do my own first, which is, interestingly enough, I always thought in the early days of my life as museums being flat art on the wall places, but as I've gone through, I've realized that there's all sorts of museums with all sorts of things. And I wonder what the panel or anybody else thinks about digitizing things like sculpture gardens, where the work of art, the Henry Moore, is in conjunction with the space that it's in, and how curators would go about making that come alive for a virtual audience. Or kind of cultural sites like back where I lived in Phoenix, there were old Hohokam sites that had been preserved kind of in situ, which might be a good walkthrough kind of thing to present to the world. So Stuart and then Sky.
I think it's an absolutely essential service to be making digital copies of these sorts of like the monoliths and whatever. If we can talk a little bit about history from the last decade, we've had different conflicts around the world where one of the things that's been happening is the destruction of artwork that is thousands of years old. That stuff needs to be protected, whether it's protected in physical form or created as a virtual form that everybody can share and everybody can learn our combined history as a planet. It's so culturally important. It has to happen.
There's a lesson in the old wonders of the world. I remember studying those as a grade school kid and said, man, I wonder what the Hanging Gardens of Babylon or the Library at Alexandria really looked like, what it really is, rather than just my mental impression from listening to a teacher describe it. Sky, and then John Idelson.
Well, I remember seeing an installation in a museum in Washington, D.C., and it was the artist was actually referred to as an architect, because somebody else actually did the painting physically on the wall of the museum, and it was referred to as an installation. So people that are museum savvy understand this better than I, because the art piece itself was on the building, and they said if it ever went on tour, they would physically just paint the wall over and then repaint it in a different location. So it was an intellectual property, not just a physical item. So that's a weird hybrid of what we're talking about.
Yeah, that's one of the great things about art, is the serious artists out there sometimes are trying to break conventions, and they do things that you don't expect. Sometimes that is a lovely part of arts. Courtney, go ahead.
Well, I think a lot of, at least in the last 10 years or so, a lot of museums have been digitizing their collections for insurance purposes, and for, in case a painting gets stolen, they can reproduce it, and, so it's not gone forever. And maybe they could press those assets that have mainly been kept privately for insurance or for documentation and to determine if something is authentic or authentication photography have been very close digitizations of works of art. They could tap into that reservoir of digitized art and build it into a virtual museum. Just have someone take the architectural design of the museum and build a virtual model of it and stick the paintings digitally on the walls, and then you could walk through it at your leisure.
Yeah, and isn't there's kind of a
there's my
catch in there
stereo
in terms of IP and intellectual property, because if there's a really high resolution version of that, and you've got a high resolution screen on your wall, why do you buy a print of anything? You can just
well, they
download
wouldn't make the high resolution images available to the public, but they'd use those to create the virtual museum.
Ah, okay. And then some sort of
Bill, if I can interrupt you on that one,
go
there's an opportunity for the artist to make money directly, where instead of the print being through agents or the physical painting, the artist can sell directly to the consumer. So the person can put it in their virtual photo frame and what have you, and display the art or change which art they want, and they can collect art from all over. Just get it straight from the artist. Cut out the middleman.
Right, but that is a disruption, and you do have an industry of art stores and art teachers and art other things that so I just think there are a lot of implications. I'm not saying it's bad or good or whatever. I mean, that's like the musicians now who are able to publish their song directly to their audience. That's one thing, and they're cutting out middlemen, and sometimes that's a great thing, but sometimes that also disrupts a system where maybe the people who help really good artists come to attention do that because they get into a world of critique and curation that helps elevate the best. I don't know. I'm guessing. Let's get John Edelson and Sky on it, because I may be totally off base here.
Not off base. Could I do a screen share?
Sure. Who's got Con? And I don't know if I've got Con or not. I don't. So I don't know. Mickey has it.
Somebody gave it to me now. So let me.
Thank you, Mickey.
See if I can make this work. Thank you. For those in the United States, we have the Smithsonian, which if you ever go to Washington, they're all free, and it would take you years to go through all the museums. The Smithsonian realized that not everybody could make it to Washington, so a number of years ago, they set up what is called the Smithsonian Learning Lab, which is to try to get the resources that they have in the museum out to the rest of the country, particularly for educators. So it's learninglab.si.edu. And it's an interesting concept. They take their collections of resources and then let you create your own little collection and then share that out. So it's designed for teachers who might want to get some authentic, original resources from the Smithsonian, create it into a collection, and he or she would then share it with their students. But because of the pandemic, they're opening a lot more of this to the public. So they have images, audio, video, they have some 3D models. You could browse it by collections, by subject and topic matter. It's really a pretty amazing resource that we have. And I think this would be a good model for other museums. With the California State Parks, since obviously we're in California, not in Washington, we're cooperating with the Smithsonian to have things that are only physically here in California to make them more broadly available across the country. So if you have a chance, check out Smithsonian Learning Lab. End of commercial.
I'm wondering though, because I just had an experience years ago. I think I mentioned this on the show once before in the early days, that I was in Chicago doing a talk, and I like to go to museums on my off day the next morning before I catch my flight out later. And so I went to the Chicago Art Institute, and I was there looking for one painting. I was looking for Hopper's Nighthawks, and I turned the wrong corner, and I found myself in front of the Renoir of the two little girls. And literally it stopped me in my tracks. And it's probably just me. Probably 1,000 people don't have that experience, but that painting with those colors at that moment and my receptiveness literally hit me like a punch in the gut. And so I wonder if that even the best reproductions of original art will ever have that kind of power. Maybe, maybe not. John Gill, weigh in on this, and then Sky.
Just remind me of Ferris Bueller. because that's the painting in Ferris Bueller, and John Hughes just got cropped in closer and closer and closer to the point that you could see the brush strokes and see that it's practical. You know, it's like old version of pixels. Yeah, I think the stuff that John just showed us is really important, because I know one of the museums I worked with during lockdown, when nobody was allowed to get near the building, they were stuck because they wanted to continue talking about, they had all their curators and guides back at home unable to do anything. So they wanted to keep talking about stuff on social media until people could get back in, keep them interested in museums. Of course, they didn't have access to enough good images. So they need to do that beforehand, and having access to that at times like this is really helpful. But ultimately, for the people I know that work in museums, one of the things that freaks them out about the idea of virtual museums is that they're invested in the physical museum, so they won't get people back into the physical museums. So whatever it is, whatever these ideas are, ultimately there has to be something that's driving people back to the physical museums to go and see those actual objects and have that experience like you mentioned with the two girls.
Yeah, Sky?
John, for me, it was the Van Gogh at the Smithsonian or the National Art Gallery, to walk in there. But John Iddleston, to your point, the ownership, I realized I had to physically pay to go into the museum just down the street, but any of the Smithsonians were either government or federally funded. So in effect, I was the actual owner of that Van Gogh that John Gill talked about. And yes, to be able to see the brush strokes of the master that painted it, and to hear and know the story of his 800 paintings that were never paid for. So that's where Stuart, my conundrum is cutting out the middleman. Is most artists are not good marketers, a la Van Gogh. So I think there's a challenge and a balance of artists are not accountants. Accountants don't necessarily make good marketing people. So,
but Sky, an interesting thing, particularly what you're doing with cooking, and I agree with you, Bill. If you go to the Smithsonian, you could go into an exhibit that has Julia Child's original kitchen, and the experience of seeing. And I watched her television shows, and my mother is a dietitian, so I spent a lot of time in kitchens. So I agree, there was something different being in front of that exhibit, which was the original Julia Child kitchen. But a lot of people can't make it to Washington, and the experience of seeing that remotely really is pretty powerful also.
Oh, I don't disagree. Yeah.
Stuart?
Just to that point, and I'll come back to John Gill's point about the business models. Artists for a long time have been trying to get away from the marketing people and try to do their own sales because they've been ripped off. Okay, I'm going to use some pop culture. I'm a Swiftie. I admit it. Right. Look at what has happened with
Tom
getting
Swift
away from
Swift?
Taylor.
Okay, just wondered.
Right. But look at what's happened with her having to get away from a bad record deal.
Yeah.
Right. And now she's in control of her own music, so she's actually making more of her own money. It's not going into other people's pockets. Go further back in time and look at New York band They Might Be Giants. They have been selling records from their website to their fans for nearly 2 decades. They even had a service at one stage where you could ring up and they would write you a song and play it down the phone for you. Okay, so this is before Napster and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, this was.
But to John's point about the museums and having people not working, what have you, it's actually an opportunity to pivot the business model. Alex has repeatedly drummed into us that things are not going back the way they were. Instead of having those people at home, have them come in one day and do a piece to camera about their speciality so that people can learn from it. The museums shouldn't just be somewhere people can come in and pay for a spectacle like a Colosseum. They're meant to be places of learning. That learning doesn't always have to happen in person. It doesn't happen to happen in the museum itself. And having people not visiting should lower the insurance costs of the museums, especially when it comes to public liability insurance, because you no longer have the public in the museum to damage things or to trip over and injure themselves.
And to Alex's point, which is, you've got this opportunity because of the lockdowns, there's nobody in them by fiat. So because of that, it's too bad that there wasn't a better system in place to immediately go in and try to do some of this stuff. Let's do Paul and then Courtney and then Guy Cochran. Guy has George Washington crossing the Delaware up. Let's start with Guy because he has visual aids.
Sure. This was an opportunity where I was going to Photo Plus, and my daughter at the last minute said, "Hey, can you take me?" And I looked up prices and happened to be able to get her a ticket. But this was one that they were studying in her class, and then I took her and look at the size of this piece. I mean, actually, let me cut right to the whole thing so you can see how big people are in relation. Oh, now I got a double. Yeah. So look at how huge this piece was. And she just was blown away at how large, and this thing's like 16 feet. So that's one thing that we forget is scale when we go to a museum or see it in a history book. It's like, how big is that thing in reality? And to see this one was jaw-dropping.
Yeah, absolutely. When I was at the
how big or how
Chicago,
small the Mona Lisa is so much smaller than it was in my head.
Yeah. And yet Thoreau's painted canvas in the Chicago Museum of Art is gigantic, and you can get lost in it. So yeah, scale is one of those issues. Who else had an hand up here? I got knocked into the other view. Sky, go ahead.
Well, context. And there's something about the tribal experience of where is that piece come from? What is its origin story? And that's maybe the curator's responsibility to, I'm not the curator, the docents, helping you understand something.
Paul, then Courtney to finish up, and we'll go to the next question.
Yeah, Bill, I was mentioning earlier about the Texas History Museum, which is, I can look out my window and see it. It's right there. And one time I was in there, I was on the second floor. The first floor is like prehistoric and the Indians and the beginnings of Texas. And the middle floor is like in between the modern era and the future. Whatever happened, it's about the oil fields and other things that happened in Texas. And the top floor is about NASA and the future. But I was on the middle floor and I ran into this old cowboy. He was on his last legs. I doubt if he's still around anymore, but he told me things about those exhibits that were amazing, about how little nuggets of information that will probably never get passed on. So I think we're missing the boat, because I looked at every museum website in Austin, and there is no access hardly of any kind to any of these museums. We're locked out of the museums right now. It's kind of a tragedy that we can't have people as guides taking you through these museums alongside a photographer who's showing what they're talking about. It's just a missed opportunity, because these places are empty. There's nobody in them right now.
Well, that's what we're saying. It's a tragedy and an opportunity at the same time. Courtney?
Yeah, and for the museum business model, what a lot of people, unlike most other commercial businesses, museums run mostly off donations. A lot of the art in them is on loan from the owners of the art, and the docents are usually volunteers. And, a lot of times the building is even donated by a rich philanthropist of some sort. So most of the time their admission fees for people coming to the museum really just go to cover air conditioning and, utility costs and a few administrative costs. But if they're not going to open the building to people, I think if they charge just a minimal amount, they could charge, a very, very small amount just to cover some of their ongoing. They can shut the air conditioning off in the building if nobody's in it, but they can cut back on a lot of their expenses and still have the docents volunteers to host Zoom sessions and so on. So they could do it at a very low cost, because they don't have a business model of a commercial operation that has to pay all the people to be there and pay for the intellectual property to be there.
Sky, do about a minute and we'll go on.
No, I don't even need that. I just want Courtney to go into the Gene Autry Museum. I would listen to anything you have to say. The Gene Autry is a treasure right like across the street from you there.
Yeah.
And Courtney, have you been in the LBJ Museum? That's
I shot
along
many
the same
things in
lines.
the LBJ Museum. I worked for LBJ for many years at his radio station.
Ah.
While he was still alive, yeah. I would work weekends, and he was in the penthouse on the top floor. And so I'd run into him in the elevator all the time.
Wait, we mentioned Gene Autry. I think it's a requirement that we mention Roy Rogers as well. Just get that out of the way. Okay, we're moving on. Next question.
Roy's museum is not the same. Gene's is amazing right there in Griffith Park. Roy's is kind of just a step above a truck stop. I mean, it's nice, but it's not the same.
Brody Hunter in the questions. Would a future museum's second hour be an opportunity for museum staff to connect to get feedback from the panelists on their streaming setups? We know that Alex is highly interested in this subject, so I think he would be open to that. So anybody who's listening, involved in this, who thinks the second hour on this, go to the second hour options in Mukana and vote it up, because that's how usually those ideas get seeded here in the office hours stream. I don't think anybody else has another opinion on that, so I'm going to move to the last question. Oh, Mickey is in there. Good.
Yeah, I mean, like in terms of commenting on setups, I mean, people can at any day just ask questions here or join the panel and bring it up.
That's true. Yeah, you don't have to wait for a special day to talk about these kind of issues. Most of the time we do general questions and answers. And so, yeah, that would be perfectly reasonable. Okay, the last one that is in today so far is from Brian Schwartz in Baltimore. What museums in the United States are you aware of that are moving aggressively into applying for these new media technologies? And I'd go beyond that. Is there anything hidden that maybe the panel or the attendees listening don't know about that you think is especially fabulous that you've run across in your travels, but that you'd like to introduce to a wider group of people? Anybody seen anything in the place and went, wow, nobody knows about this and it's cool? John Edelson?
Well, I just have to put the plug in for the California State Parks. It's PORTS, which stands for Parks Online Resources for Students and Teachers. I'll put in the link, but ports-ca.us. And we have 280 California parks, and about 45 of them are doing various online events, either directly to schools or for the general public. So check out the website.
Okay, Sky?
Well, of course, there's the Getty there in right in the 405 there. But what's the brand new car museum? The Peterson? No, in downtown LA. Courtney, what is that? That would be.
Well, there's the Peterson Car Museum. It's not in downtown LA. It's kind of mid-Wilshire area.
Oh darn!
But it is an amazing collection of cars if you're into that kind of thing.
And then of course the art museum right there across the street on Wilshire. The
new, and there's a new. I don't think it's opened up. The Museum of Television Arts and.
Yes, it's so good. It is really good.
Plamacon tube cameras. I'm excited.
It hasn't opened up yet, I don't think. It's in the old Broadway building down on Wilshire.
Yes, Guy.
Have you had to work with Plamacon tube cameras?
No, they were going out as I was coming in the days when
I've had to align those cameras.
I used to redline.
Trust me, you do not want to.
and never focus them into a light. You'll burn the tube.
That, and they were taking out the last 2-inch quad videotape machines at the very first station I ever got a tow in, back to the early days of videotape. They've been around way too long. So, things do move on.
Many of us would have collections of equipment that we could donate to museums of broadcast.
Yes, sadly. So I don't see any more questions. So it looks like we're going to run a little bit short of the top of the hour, which is fine because there is the Apple event for those of us who are Apple centric that takes place out of Apple Park. And I think the check-in for that starts right at the top of the hour here. So I guess this is time to say thank you very much for everybody coming today. Alex will be back tomorrow. And as he says, his program's almost off. So Alex won't have to leave us coming in the next couple of days ahead. Thank you all. Is there a theme tomorrow? Friday was first educators. That kind of fell away.
Comms tomorrow.
What?
Comms.
Comms. Okay, so yeah, the back channel chatter that keeps every big complicated or even sometimes small not complicated show going. And maybe I can get more traction for this idea of everybody who's doing shows stick a recorder on the comms line and get everybody's permission somehow with a opt-out permission slip, and let's get a website going where you hear people talking through the show. That would be fabulous.
Too much snarky talk on.
Yeah, I know. Well, you can beep it a lot. That'd be exciting. Even a whole string of beeps. Everybody would know exactly.
It would be just a constant tone. It'd be like a 60 hertz.
Stuart, go ahead.
I should point out I'm Australian. It is culturally appropriate for me to use language that we're not allowed to by ALEC.
So you get a pass, huh?
Oh, we got a last minute question from Mike Burns in Spokane. Anybody see any smoking BF deals? What
Black Friday?
Black Friday. Oh yeah. Has anybody seen anything in terms of gear? Isn't it funny?
Only
it's not
if you
even
plug 110 gear into 240 volts, then it would be smoking.
That would be a smoking deal. You let out the smoke of life from the component.
I saw a really tempting something come through from DVE store. I did. I'm so tempted. So tempted.
Guy, what's selling hot in the store right now? What's happening?
No, don't say it. Then it'll all go away. Okay, there it goes.
Yeah. No, it's quiet Thursday.
Those little Rode wireless Go's are really popular right now. That seems to be flying off the shelves. They're kind of hard to get. A10 minis, of course, Pocket 4K, Pocket 6K. Those aren't necessarily going on sale, but that's what seems to be.
Which of the three ATEM models is the hot seller? Are people going to the top
Pro
and getting the ISOs?
The Pro and the Mini, the ISO not as much. So yeah, the Mini, as soon as we get them in, they go out.
Nice. And what about lighting? Because everybody's been talking about lighting around. Are there any particular lighting things that?
Westcott, for us, it's the ring lights just because we have our own brand. So prismatic lighting, and then we got the Diva ring light. IntelliTech's been interesting. If you haven't seen their stuff, they have those foldable lights that are pretty neat. They're kind of pricey, but you can get them with in a kit with a nice grid. So those are really cool as well.
Do you sell those photo poles that you're using?
Yeah, there's auto poles.
Yeah, do you have
one?
one?
I have one right here.
Okay.
Yeah, we have like 9 of them in stock if you need one.
Is your ceiling just covered with those ring lights like we saw in that demo video you were showing earlier?
Not this one. I would love to have that here because the light, if you watch that video that I posted up yesterday, the light that comes down is amazing with the high CRI. Later in that clip, I have some fruit in a bowl and it just looks remarkable because it was shot on the Ursa G2 in RAW. And holy cow, when you get good lighting, good soft lighting that's that big with a good sensor and, a good format like B-RAW, holy cow, it looks.
Put your ceiling on the
What
side,
about
it'd be a
mixers,
great
Guy?
car
What's a hot mixer that's selling right now?
Mixers, I would say the sound devices, the MixPre 3, MixPre 6, we got a bunch of B stock in that's going quick. There was that fire that happened. And so we just saw a price increase in sound devices stuff. So if it hit them, be aware in the next couple months that stuff's most likely going to start to go up in price or be hard to find. So if you're looking at a mixer, you might want to get one more sooner than later because they're probably going to dry up if they're not producing any more of the chips for 6 months or so.
Stuart's holding a PCB card desperately.
Yeah, Guy, if I can, if the experiment I'm about to do with this works, there's going to be a bump in the second-hand price of Kona 4 cards.
Okay. All right, you've been warned.
Raw 4K DCI global shutter, 12-bit.
You're writing new drivers for them?
frames. No, I'm going to be the person proving that it works. And if it doesn't, ABAP, I'm called.
Does it only work with your Scion though? That would be would be a limiter.
No, actually, that is supported in vMix as a 4-input SDI input card for turning a computer into a broadcast vision mixer.
Ah, interesting. Okay. Well, we've come pretty close to the top of the hour, so I think this is it for today. Thank you all for coming. Thanks, panelists. Thanks, Alex, for being here and for starting the whole thing originally and giving us this place to hang out every morning and learn from each other. We will be back tomorrow at the same time. And let me just encourage you, if you're listening and you haven't ever participated in office hours, give it a try. Sneak in somewhere between 6 and 7, raise your hand, go through the preliminary checks and things like that. It's not that scary, trust me. All right, we'll see you all tomorrow. Thanks, everybody.